everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Fearcast. This is the podcast dedicated to OCD, anxiety spectrum disorders, and getting your life back. I'm your host, Kevin Foss. I'm a licensed therapist specializing in OCD and anxiety, and welcome to this question and answer-based podcast. So if you have a question for me to answer about OCD and anxiety and how to work with that, how to overcome it, if you have a family member who might have it and you're wondering how to help them, this is what this podcast is for. So you can go to fearcastpodcast.com. You can send me a question by clicking on the submit a question link, and I will read it, consider it, and likely put it up. Now, I've said this before, and I'll say it again. There is a little bit of a backlog, which is fantastic, but if you would like your question to get bumped to the top, and even if you don't need it bumped to the top, but would like to contribute to the podcast, send me an audio question. Those audio questions will get bumped up to the next recording. You can go over to Instagram. I'm over there at Instagram. You can send me a direct message there and just click on the little microphone button there. Send me an audio there. You can send me an email through the website, Fearcast Podcast, and send me a shared Google Drive to your audio. You recorded it. There are a couple apps out there. You can also just email them to me at questions@fearcastpodcast.com. So for those who have listened to those episodes, gosh, I think they make the podcast so much more lively, so much more interesting to hear your voices out there as opposed to just hearing my voice over and over again. And it is fun to hear the diversity in the questions from the people asking it. So let's see. I don't really have anything to add lately. I hope everyone's March, everybody. Hope everyone's March is going well. This is going to date it then. If you're listening to this sometime this summer, you'll be like, who cares what's happening in March? Or life is awful in the future, and they said, oh, March, how quaint. Wasn't that, remember when, I don't know, the aliens weren't eating our brains? That was a nice time. So anyways, I hope that's not what's happening in the future, but, weird things happen. So let's, I suppose without further ado, let's get on to the questions. Let's see here. I think I'm going to start, I think I'm going to start with the questions. No, I talked myself out of it. I'm going to read a success story. This is actually something that I haven't mentioned before. If you have a success story, we also want to hear those. If you go to fearcastpodcast.com and do the submit a question link, you'll have the option. You can say if it's a podcast question or if it's a success story. If you have a success story, I would love to hear about it. So this is a success story coming from Daphne. So she writes, I'm not recovered, but since being recently diagnosed with OCD and thinking it was generalized anxiety disorder for 10 plus years, I feel so empowered by your podcast and the exposures in your podcast as a subtle way of shoving in our faces and showing us that thinking about it or being triggered isn't the end of our lives. Thank you so much for everything. Keep being you and making these wonderful podcasts. Daphne, thank you so much for that, for those wonderfully kind words. And I hope I'm subtly or kindly, I guess, shoving it in your face. It sounds a bit more aggressive saying it like that. I hope it doesn't feel like that. But I'm so glad, Daphne, that there's something within the podcast that's been helpful for you and is encouraging. And, keep at it. Keep pushing at it. I'm so sorry that you were misdiagnosed as GAD for so long. But that's kind of what they say is that the average person, I think the stat is it takes 13 years. Is it 13 years? Maybe 13. I'm going to say 13. 13 years between the start of symptoms to the time that someone gets reasonable and appropriate treatment, which is a bonkers long time. So it's not unheard of, but hopefully with this podcast, with other podcasts, with all the information on the internet, this information is getting out there and people are learning about what's going on sooner so they can get appropriate treatment faster. So for anybody else out there, if you have a recovery story, not just saying wonderful things about the podcast, which is a delight, but if you have found recovery, what worked? What helped you most? What were some things that weren't working? Because we want to hear all of that. So if you feel comfortable sharing your success story, send them to me over at Fearcast Podcast, and I'll be happy to share them. So we've got 2 questions today. The first question is going to come from Isaac. Isaac says, I had previously been diagnosed with GAD, so generalized anxiety disorder. More recently, out of the blue, have been obsessed about whether I'm gay or not. And then they say parenthetically, I've always been exclusively interested in girls without a doubt. They go on to say, I suspect that it's HOCD based on your podcast, but I've been struggling with some research saying HOCD is fake. I believe I have been dealing with this for 3 months and that my anxiety towards these thoughts have lessened, though I still hate them and they don't turn me on whatsoever. My question is this. If HOCD, and again I say HOCD is the old term that we used to use. We now say sexual orientation OCD. HOCD stood for homosexual OCD, or I suppose heterosexual OCD as well, to have that kind of flip on that. But now we just generally refer to it as sexual orientation OCD. You have heard me say this before, switching the terms. Some people still use the old terms, some people don't. Anyways, so the question is this. If HOCD, sexual orientation OCD, is fake, how do I accept my gayness when gay thoughts don't turn me on and only cause anxiety? They then say, if HOCD is real, any additional tips on accepting these thoughts would be helpful. Thanks so much and love the podcast. Okay, Isaac, thank you so much for this question. First off, where are you getting the information that says that HOCD is fake? I'm going to look it up. I guess I'll research this and see what it says about HOCD is fake. I suppose people are probably saying it's not rumination about one's sexual orientation. It is internalized homophobia. It is suppressed sexuality. It's probably people making those arguments. However, I will disagree with them. One thing that you've noted here is these thoughts don't turn you on even at all. So how do you accept these gay thoughts? Well, one thing that often happens with folks with OCD is this sense that they have argued for the position that they believe to be true 1,000 times, 1,000,000 times, but that obsessive doubt still pops in and suggests that maybe they're wrong. Maybe they haven't investigated it enough. Maybe it's really deep down. It's deep, deep down within them. And it'll come out. It'll come out eventually, right? The truth about them will come out. And they need to ruminate about it, think about it, look for evidence for it, question it, get to the bottom of it, right? To discover the truth. Am I gay? Am I not gay? Right? It's this seemingly endless loop because you again go back to, I believe this to be true, and then it says, yeah, but are you sure? And that's enough to yank somebody back into that rumination process. So it's something that, I've said this before, we want to trust our compulsive conclusion. So it's a silly way of saying, through one's compulsions, through your compulsions, I bet they are to evaluate your feelings. Am I attracted to men? Am I attracted to women? And then, and to see where you come up with. Now, you've said when you evaluate and think about your attraction towards men, it doesn't really do anything for you. When you evaluate your feelings towards women, it does something for you. But And that's not the case for everybody. Sometimes, people can be so overwhelmed by their anxiety, they kind of don't feel anything for anybody. And that's just, one of the things that anxiety does is it feels all-consuming and can muddle things, which then furthers that obsession about their sexuality, saying, see, I don't even feel attracted to women anymore, the people to whom I feel I should be attracted to, putting all that in quotes, right? So that just furthers the evidence and the reason why, the quote, reason why one should do their compulsions, right? It justifies their compulsive process. But you've been fighting for this thing that you believe to be true. So what I would advise is think about what's the thing that you've been fighting for, and perhaps trust that is true. That what if that were true, this thing that deep down you believe to be accurate about your core self, about you, yet this doubtful thought keeps cropping back up and keeps yanking you into this rumination. If we could trust that it was true, if we acted as if that were true, what would be different for you? What would you think about? What would you not think about? Where would you put your energy? If you trusted that you were, by what you're saying, if you were straight, would you spend all your time ruminating about your sexuality? Probably not. You would act as if that were true. And that's kind of what we're talking about here. Now, in that there is exposure. Some people would say it's probably just avoidance or putting your head in the sand. But some would also say, and I would argue this because I am, you would be practicing more of a redirection towards your values and what you believe to be accurate and true about yourself, and then taking steps towards that. Of course, there's space for exposure in there, obviously, but that would be one way to accept it, or accept the presence of these, is by acting as if your compulsive conclusion is accurate. Now, you said, if HOCD is fake, how do I accept my gayness with my gay thoughts don't turn me on? Well, I have a hard time just coming from the perspective to say that HOCD is fake. Because to say, because then you're then saying, all right, HOCD is fake, so I am indeed gay, but nothing about that is interesting to me. It's like this is a very bad analogy, but it's almost as if me saying, well, I guess I like, I'm someone who likes eating mushrooms, but also I hate mushrooms, but I guess I have to accept that I'm somebody who loves mushrooms, so. That's something that I have to do. This is the food mushrooms, not the drug mushrooms. Anyways, I don't know why I needed to even specify that. So one of the things that OCD often does is it makes you think that the solution is by resolving the content of the obsession rather than accepting the feeling of doubt and anxiety and living your life. So my position has often been that OCD isn't really a thought problem, it's a feeling problem. It's the doubt, right? It's not a delusional disorder where someone doesn't have a grasp on reality. It's they have doubt. The feeling shows up, which then causes them to go back into their rumination to resolve that feeling. Yeah, there are some cognitive distortions going on, but that's to a certain degree true for everybody. And for folks with OCD, that is especially true. But OCD convinces you again, the way that you're going to get out of this, Isaac, is by getting to the bottom of whether or not you are indeed gay or whether or not you're indeed straight. It's ultimately not. You've told me in this, you don't believe that's true. You don't believe it's true. But that feeling is there. So what I'm saying is we want to instead expand what you're willing to experience and to say, all right, I have these thoughts. Yes, I do. I also have all these other thoughts and feelings that are happening all at once as well. This idea of just truly radically accepting the stuff that's in your head without agreeing that it's true or not. My tired example is this, I give this example a lot and I probably get it on the podcast. A very extreme example too. So if you were to look at the book Mein Kampf is Adolf Hitler's manifesto. I don't need to explain who Hitler is. I think everybody knows by now. So he wrote this book and it talks all about his position and his beliefs. Now we can then agree that the book exists. It's a real book. You can buy it. I don't even know if they sell it on Amazon. Point is, you can buy it, you can have it, but you don't need to then agree with the content of it, right? There's a big separation there. We can agree that the book is real, but not that it's a fact, right? It's factually present, but not factual in content. OCD says you need to get into the book and you need to question whether or not you believe it or not. And that's not what the conversation needs to be about. Instead, we want to pull back to say, for right now, you know what? I'm not going to engage with that conversation because that ruminative and compulsive cycle has been unproductive, has been unfruitful for you. Instead, we want to shift over to say, you know what, I'm going to disengage and I'm going to say, you know what, these are the thoughts that are there. They are there. This is the feeling that I have. I have the feeling of anxiety. I have the feeling of doubt. I have the feeling of maybe anger. I have the feeling of annoyance. I have the feeling of depression, maybe even despair with the cycle that's been going on, right? Now, all of that can be felt in the moment because all of that might be truly felt in the moment. Now, but it doesn't then mean all of those things, the concepts of those are true either. It doesn't mean, if you feel despair, it doesn't mean that you are globally despaired. You feel a feeling in that moment. For right now, and that feeling is going to change. This doubt is always going to change. I love that it said, this feeling that you have of uncertainty and doubt will always go away as evidenced by the fact that it comes back. It will come back, and then it'll go away. The way that you can accept this is to say, for right now, what do I feel? And what are the thoughts in my head? What are the mental images that are floating around? And how can I say that's a fact as this moment, a fact that they are present, and then redirect towards my life, the thing that I value more. So that would be one of the ways that you can certainly do this. Now, the next question, if HOCD is real, any additional tips on accepting these thoughts would be helpful. So I think that I've already answered that. All of this is, within the broader perspective of acceptance and mindfully accepting things, and just radical acceptance of thoughts, feelings, images, sensations, and urges. But the response prevention is disengaging with the debate over the content of it and debate over your relationship with it. So I would encourage you to practice that, and that can be done just, in individual moments, right? Just right now. What are you thinking, feeling, sensing? What is there? You don't need to like it. You don't need to agree with it. You don't need to support it and say that it is, or you don't need to put a judgment on it to say it's good or bad or right or wrong. It is, right? It might be raining where you are and you don't like the rain, okay? Regardless, it's raining that day. It's raining. It's raining for right now. That might change, right? It will change. Not might, it will change. But for right now, it is raining. So that would be something to continue to work toward, is practicing that and then disengaging from that. So if you haven't already, I would encourage you to work with a therapist on this to talk more about how to work with it. So let's see here. All right, so let's jump into that next question. I have a session at the top of the hour. We're going to do this real quick, I hope. All right, so this next question comes from Lee, L-E-I-G-H. Lee, yeah, I'll say Lee. We're going to go with Lee. All right. So Lee says, do you have any advice for someone dealing with a stubborn spouse who will not seriously consider that they may be struggling with ROCD? There are many signs of it, like chasing feelings, inexplicable doubts, distress about how things will turn out for us, though I grant it may not be ROCD. Curious if you have encountered cases where people are or spend time in denial of OCD or any theme. Lee, yes, of course we do. Plenty of people can be in denial of their obsessions and the presence of it. And some people very much get fixated on the idea that, this is kind of what we were talking about in the previous question. They get fixated on the idea that the solution to their doubts is by solving or resolving the doubt, right? Or getting an answer to it. So in this, it might be, so that's where they get fixated on it. For someone fixated on ROCD, they might need to, their doubt, their chasing feelings, right? Their distress about how things will turn out for you two. They might be kind of fused with it, to borrow ACT's language, fused with the idea that is the way out of this, is by getting that positive, wonderful, lovey-dovey feeling again. And that, eradicating doubt from one's mind and making sure that you're confident that life will turn out. Now, we all perhaps acknowledge that, we don't know how relationships will turn out, right? If we think hard enough, there can be doubts pretty much about anything in life. So, having someone, so it's not unheard of to have somebody doubt whether or not they have their diagnosis. And sometimes they then justify that doubt for any number of reasons. The best way that you can support this person is, if you haven't done this already, you can gently, lovingly send to them an article about ROCD and say, I know we've been struggling with this, and this article kind of resonated with what we've been going through, right? Because to a certain degree, both of you are in it. When there are doubts there, you can acknowledge, the doubt must be painful, that you still love them, that you're still there for them, you're still in the relationship, and asking, how you can help. And there may be some things that you are unable to do, and also some things that you're unwilling to do, and you can be honest about that. I think the most important thing is just to continue to encourage, perhaps simply encouraging this partner of yours to go get an assessment with a therapist, a competent OCD professional, and they can have that conversation, right? That OCD professional who knows what ROCD is and treats it and knows what it's all about. They might be able to then say, "Hey, here's what's going on," and they can tell both of you, "Yes, ROCD is at play," or "No, ROCD is not at play, and hey, you in the relationship, you, Lee, you're doing a whole bunch of stuff that's creating this doubt," right? I mean, I don't know you, I don't know your spouse. It's possible it's not ROCD, and you're acting in a whole bunch of ways that are instilling doubt, creating doubt, fostering doubt within the relationship. I don't know, but I think getting an assessment from a professional would be a great idea. And it doesn't mean that you have to get treatment for it. It's just saying, let's go chat about it, and to see if maybe it is you and OCD or ROCD, or maybe it's me, or maybe it's nothing, or maybe it's something that we need to work out through actual couples therapy, because there might be things that are creating doubt that need to be looked at from a relationship therapy perspective, right? So I'd say, start with an article, start with a podcast. I think I've done an ROCD episode. I think other people have done ROCD episodes, and listen to those. Listen to them together and say what resonates with you, what doesn't. Does this kind of sound like you? Does it not sound like you? And then maybe that's a way to broach the subject in a calm and caring way. So, Lee, I hope that was helpful. I'm going to call it quits there. What I would love from anybody out there, if you have feedback, so if you are the person struggling with ROCD, how would you have wanted your partner to broach the subject? What would be a good way? What would have been a kind way to have them bring it up? If there was someone out there who's in this exact situation that Lee is in, can they message and say, "Here's what I did, and here's how I talked about this with my partner and got them on board," or opened it up, right? So message me questions over there. Go over to find me on Instagram, message me over there. You can also send me questions over at fearcastpodcast.com. And I would love to put those up as follow-ups to this episode. I'm curious about what other people are doing. So, all right, let's call it quits here. I'll slide that music in. Thank you all so much for joining me for this podcast. I hope you are all doing well and continue to do well, pushing yourself. Please remember that the Fearcast is not a substitute for psychotherapy. If you have any questions about therapy or need a little bit of help, you can go to fearcastpodcast.com, click on the Find Help link, and there's going to be some stuff there. So until next time, everybody, take a risk, challenge yourself, and don't take your brain too seriously. Bye.